Okay, so this demonstration for bread rolls would be your first year 8 practical lesson at school, but due to COVID-19 we are not allowed at the moment to do practical lessons at school. So in some ways this is an advantage because you've got more time at home to let your bread rise than you would have in the constraints of an hour lesson. If you were in school making it, you would not turn your oven on until your bread was ready to go in the oven. As you're at home, you need to turn your oven on to gas 7 or 220 centigrade before you start. You need a baking sheet which you need to lightly grease with some oil. You then need to weigh out your strong bread flour. Now the reason you need strong or bread flour, and we have strong flour and we have here bread flour, they're both the same thing, is that they guarantee a certain amount of protein in that bread, and that protein is needed to make gluten, and that gluten makes your bread stretchy. So if you've got digital scales, remember to put your bowl on and zero them before you measure out your flour. And you need 250 grams of strong plain flour. You can use half and half strong white flour and wholemeal flour to give your bread more fibre, but I've just got strong white flour here. To that I am going to add 1 sachet of fast action yeast. It must be fast action for school because it speeds up the reaction. It has a catalyst in it that speeds up the reaction. For home it doesn't matter whether it's fast action or not. And 1 sachet weighs 7 grams. You're going to add that to your flour. There's no need to sieve your flour because the yeast is going to add the air bubbles, not the action of sieving. So that's 7 grams of yeast, and to that you're going to add half a teaspoon of salt. Now the salt helps to develop the gluten, so all bread has got salt in it. Okay, you're going to give that a mix. Oh, I've lost my mixer, hold on. I like to use a palette knife, but you can use a wooden spoon just as easily. You're then going to measure out 175 millilitres of warm water, hand hot water. You can just actually put your hand in it and you can feel the heat. The reason it needs to be warm is that yeast needs 4 conditions to grow. It needs food, which it gets from the flour. It needs moisture, which it gets from the water. It needs warmth, which it's also going to get from the water. And it needs time. Okay, so to that you're going to add 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Now some recipes use margarine or butter rubbed in. This recipe uses olive oil. And you add that to the water. And the reason we use a fat is that it restricts the action of the yeast. If you let yeast work on its own, it will create bubbles of different size of carbon dioxide, and that might mean you get a hole in the centre of your bread. By adding the fat, you're restricting the action of the yeast, so it makes small air bubbles which gives it an even texture. So you're adding all your water and oil to your flour. Don't add it a bit at a time, just add it all. If it looks a little bit dry, add a little bit more water. You do not want a dry dough, you want a slightly sticky dough. Mix that around, make sure you're incorporating all the flour. Start with your palette knife or wooden spoon, and then use your clean washed hands to gather it all together into a ball of dough. Now that is ready to knead. Now the process of kneading will develop the dough. So you need a clean surface, and you're going to add some flour to your clean surface, and then you're going to knead your dough for 5 to 10 minutes. Now if you're in lesson, you would only have time to do it for 5 minutes. If it's a little bit sticky, add a little bit more flour to it to make it easy to knead. And kneading involves folding it over, pushing it, turning it round. Folding it over, pushing it, turning it round. Still a little bit sticky, a bit more flour. And you carry on doing this for 10 minutes. Now you can either use your knuckles to push the bread, or you can use the palm of your hand. It's up to you. Fold, turn, push, fold, turn, push. Now in the lesson you would spend 5 minutes doing this. This develops the gluten. It makes the bread stretchy so that it traps the carbon dioxide that the yeast is producing. So, having kneaded your bread, at home you then have time to put it back in the bowl and let it rise to double the size. Putting it on in a warm place, top of the cooker would be fine, covered with a cloth, and you leave that to double its size. At school you would not have time to do that. The proving process, it's called, would be done in the oven. So here's my bread that has been kneaded and proved, and I'm just going to get it back into shape again, and then you're ready to shape it into your bread rolls. So you get it into a circle, and using a knife or a palette knife you're going to cut it into 6 segments as equal as you can, and then you're going to shape your bread rolls, and I'm going to show you some basic shapes. So we'll start off with the basic bread roll then. So having floured your hands, you put the bread in your palm of your hand and you keep pinching it up so that all the folds will be at the bottom of your bread roll and you will have a smooth surface. So that's your first one then, just the basic bread roll shape, which you then pop on your tray. So the second shape then, again using the basic bread roll shape, put it in the palm of your hands, pinch it up till all the folds are under the bottom, and then turn it over to your bread roll shape. You're going to flatten it down a bit, and this one I'm going to make into a flower. So I get my scissors and I cut 5 petals. 4 would make a cross, 5 a flower. And then when it's ready to go in the oven, I will glaze that and put some seeds or nuts in the middle of my flower. Next one then, one that most people like doing, is a hedgehog. So again, your basic bread roll shape, tucking it all underneath so it's nice and smooth on top. Turn it over and you're going to pinch a nose in your bread roll, and then taking your scissors again, you're going to cut some spikes. Make them quite deep because your bread will carry on proving, which means it will be producing more carbon dioxide and getting bigger and lighter in texture. And when we come to put that in the oven, we'll glaze it and give our hedgehog some eyes. Third shape, fourth shape then. This time we're going to roll it like a sausage. You can be inventive with your shapes. You can spend as much time as you want at home on these shapes. Obviously, if you're doing it in the lesson, then it is time dependent how many shapes you make out of your bread, or if you're running out of time, you'll just make the basic bread roll. So roll out your bread roll into roll. Try and make it as even as possible. This one's a bit thick at this piece, and it has to be fairly long. It will keep on stretching back. The gluten is making it stretchy, and then you can knot it into a pretzel shape. Another shape, this time you'll cut it into 3 separate balls. Roll those into sausages, all of the same length. Then you're going to get either some water or a little bit of your glaze. Now your glaze that you're going to put on your bread could either be egg, milk, or egg and milk, or you might decide not to put any glaze on at all. You stick the tops together and then you plait your bread, working towards the centre all the time. At the end, you're going to put a little bit of your glaze or water again to stick it together, and you have a plait. And the final one I'm going to show you, but you can do all sorts of different ones, is the cottage loaf. So you're going to take off about 1/3 of your amount, and you're going to make that into a very small bread roll. Very small bread roll. Tucking under again. Then you're going to make the other one into a larger bread roll, tucking all the creases underneath so it's nice and smooth on top. You're going to put a little bit of your glaze or water, put your little ball on top of your bigger ball, put your finger straight the way through, and you've got a little cottage loaf. So once you've made your shapes at home, you will have time to leave those to rise to double the size. At school, you will actually put them in the oven and then put the oven on, and while the oven is warming up,